Welcome, everyone. It's a new day with new things to learn. And today we're going to be working with our Husqvarna Viking Amber Air S600 serger. But most of what I'm talking about can apply to a lot of different sergers out there. There's all different ways of doing it. What I love about our S600 serger is that we can kind of create things and override things and do things. I got a lot of exciting things to show you. And I'm not going to give away some of the secrets to the end, but I do want you to know that I'm going to start off with showing you some beginning ways of sewing, beginning and ending your seams. And then I'm going to show you how to do some rolled hem to make some beautiful napkins. Look at this, a beautiful Christmas napkin. Isn't this gorgeous? This is a double-sided. It takes a little bit more planning to make double-sided napkins, but that's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about how to do a rolled hem, and then we're going to move to one of my favorite things to do. And this is something that Bonnie from So-and-so in Appleton, she kind of led me down this path a few years ago about creating a fringe with our serger. And we're going to use a 2-thread wide wrap to do that. I'm going to show you all the secrets to do that. But I think to start with, we're just going to start with some really simple techniques. I'll just give you a little tease. This is what the fringe looks like. And it's pretty amazing. Depending upon the threads you're using, it will give you a completely different look. And I think it's just amazing. So I've started a couple of projects where I've added the fringe to it, and then I've added some decorative stitches and some floating stitches. So I'm doing a lot of things now where I'm combining serger techniques with my sewing machine, and that really just kind of blows everything out of the water. And it's like you're starting from scratch with new ideas and new ways of doing things. So as people are joining us now, I am on Wi-Fi today. Usually I'm on Ethernet, but so if you find that maybe it's not coming really clear, just give it a second. I'm sure it might have something to do with that. We have a little storm today, but that's the way things go. So we'll just play it by ear. And I'm going to come back and answer all your questions afterwards, but it would really mean a lot to me as I'm going if you have questions that you ask, because I want to make sure I've explained things properly to you. But I will come back and answer any questions afterwards. So the first thing we're going to start with is how you can take fabric, and a lot of times when you're serging things, you're going to have threads that hang off the edges, and you've got to find a way of locking them in. You can take a double-dyed needle and take the threads and put them through the seam. It doesn't work so well when you're doing rolled hem, because rolled hem is really tight, and often it just takes way more energy than we need. So there's quite a few different techniques that you can use to start and to finish your seams, and I'm going to show you that. And then I'm also going to talk about how you can go around a curve, because sewing a curve on a serger is a little different than it would be on a sewing machine, mostly because there's a blade that's cutting the edge. And if you don't take precautions, as the blade is coming down, it's going to cut into your seam before you get a chance to turn the corner. So I want to show you a trick for sewing around curves, and then we'll get into using some of our decorative stitches. So thank you all for joining me, and let's get started. It's time. I'm just going to start by taking 2 pieces of fabric, and I'm going to put them together like I want to serge them, and I'll show you this technique for beginning and ending. So I'm going to switch over to my serger, and this is the Amber Air 600 serger. You can see right now I have the 4-thread overlock that has been selected, and I've got my woven medium fabric. It's suggesting that I put the blade at 6.5. And I honestly have no idea where I put the blade. Sorry, because I was doing a different technique, so I moved it. The camera was a little bit in my way. So I'm just going to lower that a little bit. And you would want to adjust that if you wanted to adjust your seam allowance. Now, normally, and I'm going to take the foot off so you can see this. When you take the foot on and off, it's actually easier if you pull it to the side like that, and it comes right off. On any good serger, and I think pretty much all newer sergers, there's 2 different sets of feed dogs. The one in the front is separate from the one in the back. And depending upon what fabric you're using, this is called the differential. Depending if you're working with a knit fabric, like for example here, if I go and work with a knit fabric and select a knit fabric, it's going to change the differential to 1.3. And it's going to speed up. You can see the little feed teeth here, feed dogs, it's going to speed up the feeding of the feed teeth so that it will not stretch the fabric out. And that's why it's really nice to have our sewing advisor that we can select our fabric. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is put the foot back on. All right, I put it in sideways and I just rotate it like that and drop it down. And if I didn't do it correctly, I can always shift it, drop the foot down, and there we go. Our foot is on. All right. So when I go to start serging, normally with most sergers, you usually just check and do a little bit of a stitch. Unlike a sewing machine, you don't need to have fabric underneath your serger. So I'm just going to sew and make sure that everything is threaded correctly. And I can see it's not because I have this needle sticking out, this thread here. So that means I need to rethread my needle. All right. So when I'm looking here like this, all right, I've got all these threads. I'm going to lift up my foot, pull this out. I got a whole bunch of, just before I was starting, I realized that I hadn't threaded my needle. So I was just kind of getting things ready. And I thought I had threaded my needle, but apparently I haven't. So what I'm going to do is, there is a needle threader that comes with your sergers, but I'm just going to thread it manually because this thread goes in pretty good. Right now I'm using decorative threads. And normally you would use the large spools of serger thread if you were going to piece a quilt or something like that. And I say I'm going to thread it quickly, but maybe I'm not. Let me just see here. Sorry for the delay, guys. Let me just cut this. I'm jinxed, Amy. How's it going? Is the people starting to join? Anybody have any questions to start with?
I don't see any questions yet, just lots of people saying hello.
Oh, it's so exciting to see you all joining me today. It means so much to me that you take time out of your day. All right, so I think we're good. And so by doing that little bit of a stitch, you kind of recognize whether or not everything's set right. And if I forget to put my foot down, it's going to warn me. So I can't make a mistake. And I can use my knee lift if I want to drop the foot down like that. And I'm just sewing. And I can see, and I'll zoom in here. Let me see if I can zoom in really close. I know I use dark green thread, so you may not see it as well as you'd like to, as I'd like you to. But it's forming a stitch on the stitch fingers. So that looks like everything's good. And now I can put my fabric in. Now, and this is kind of different than a sewing machine that you can actually start serging without any fabric. Normally, when you start serging, you're serging out from this edge and you're turning you're leaving some fabric to cut off. Let me see if I can brighten this up a little bit for you, okay? Brighten up. There we go. Okay, so I want to trim that fabric off. And I need to start back here because this is where the blade is. The needles are back here. So I need to start the fabric ahead of time so that it'll cut off that edge. Now, as I get to the point where I'm just where the needle is, where the fabric is, okay? My needles are right where the fabric is. What I'm going to do, and if you want to, you can manually turn your needle down into the fabric to hold it. I'm going to lift the foot up. I'm going to pull that thread off of the stitch finger like that, and I'm going to bring it around the front, and I can let it hang down over there. So what that's going to do is it's going to sew that tail into the seam, and then I don't have to go and worry about burying those threads later on. See it cut it off. And I'll come back and show you what it looks like. All right. So you see that edge? Those tails are caught in there. The trick is to make it look nice is to pull the threads right off. You see I've got some extra threads there? That's because I didn't pull all the threads away. So if I pulled a little taunter and then took the threads and put them down there, all of those threads are caught in the seam and I don't have to worry about them unraveling anymore. Now, when I come to the end, it's going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to come to the end. And when I get to that point where I'm just at the very last, all right, my needles are just off the fabric. I'm going to kind of reverse it. I'm going to lift up the foot, pull the fabric off of the thread off of the stitch finger, And now I'm going to flip it forward like this and tuck it underneath. And I'll put my foot back down, and I've got the fabric at an angle because I don't want it to cut any of the good stitches I have here. I'm just going to sew like that, okay? So that's one way to get the stitching caught on either end, and then whatever's left, you just trim off those threads. All right. Now, I am going to look up, and right here, I have my fabric set for woven medium. I am going to set it to woven light because, woven. It was on woven light. I'm going to set it to woven medium because I recognize that the threads, my needle threads are a little bit loose. Okay. And so that's why choosing your fabric can be, usually when I'm working on quilting cotton, stuff like that, I will use woven medium. And if I'm working on denim, jean fabric and stuff like that, I would go to a woven. This is like a heavy denim. I would go to the woven heavy setting. All right. And everything that you do makes a big difference when it comes to that. And I'm going to lift this up. All right. And I'm just going to select it back. And then I notice my needles threads are in front. There we go. Okay. So I'm ready to start again. This time I want to show you a different technique. So if I was going to go and sew, let me just zoom out here a little bit. And let's say I know that I want to cut that 1/2 inch and I want to turn the corner without stopping. What I'm going to do, and it might not make any sense to you, maybe what I'll do is I'll come a little farther down and then I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, so I'm cutting off about a 1/2 inch of fabric. Now, as I get down to the bottom, I can either serge right off, but oftentimes it would be nice to just turn the corner without stopping and cutting the threads. But to do that, I got a problem, right? Because I need to get rid of this fabric. So if you want to do something like that to turn the corner, just go in and whatever fabric that you cut off, just trim that away before you go to turn the corner. All right, so now I'm going to come down to this point, and then I'm going to stop, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. So I'm just getting to the point where the fabric is off the edge of the needle. The needle's not touching the fabric anymore. I'm going to lift up my foot. I'm going to pull it back off the stitch finger, and I'm going to rotate it. Let's see if I get a little bit of fullness there. Rotate it forward. And you notice that area where I cut that fabric? It's going to come right in there, and I can put my foot down. And if I want to, I can even pull back my needle threads if I feel like there's a little bit of extra thread there. And when I put my foot down, the blade is ready to continue cutting. Does that make sense what I did? I just want to make sure everybody understands that. And it is so nice now that I could just go in and start serging, and it will cut where I stopped. And now I can keep going without having to cut the threads and start all over again. All right, now I come to the end. And if I wanted to lock that in, I'm going to do this again. I stop, pull the fabric off the stitch finger, and rotate it upside down. And put the lock down like this. And remember not to leave it so you're going to stitch, and just sew that and then come right off of it like that. So Amy, does anybody have any questions about that?
We have a couple of questions. Well, one about thread.
See that nice corner? I didn't have to stop and cut my thread at all. I just kept going. So yeah, let me see.
So you've got a question about thread, wondering about the difference between serger thread, the weight, or like what's the difference between the different types of thread you would use in your serger?
Well, that's a good question because I tend to use whatever's the right color for me, right? And the next thing I'm going to show you is doing a rolled hem on the serger. So I wanted to make sure that I had the right color on there. The thing about serger spools, when you buy the big cones, they're actually pretty expensive because they usually have 3,000 yards on them. And so because you're using, especially if you're sewing a garment, you're using 4 threads, right? You're going to have 2 needle threads and 2 looper threads. So you want to have thread that is really a good price for the volume of thread you're going to use. So a serger thread, those big cones are very valuable for serging with because you get a lot on them. But they are very, you would never want to use them in a sewing machine because they don't have the same quality of thread. They would break easier and stuff like that. Okay, so they're not meant for your sewing machine. They're meant for your serger. But if I need to do something and I have 3 colors, like I did some orange or I did some shocking pink, and I have 2 spools of serger thread, I'm going to supplement it with whatever I've got because I don't have a store near me where I can go out and buy more. Most serger thread is not a heavy duty like a sewing thread. A sewing thread's 50 weight. I have no idea. I'm only guessing, but it's not so much that it's thinner, it's weaker. So it's not going to hold up. That's why you're using it on the serger. But a serger thread does fabulous. Now, there are other times where I want to use special threads. And for a rolled hem, that would be one of them. I really love using, it's called a woolly poly. Used to be woolly nylon. I'm not even sure if you can really get a good look at it. It's almost like translucently, there's just fine fibers that are woven together. And what is nice about this, let me just pull up a sample. I'll go over and get a sample for you, okay? This is a rolled hem that I did with the woolly poly. And it gives you the absolute tightest, most beautiful rolled hem because as you're serging, it is stretching and it's rolling the fabric for you. So something like that really gives you, that's where it's important to use the right thread for the technique. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about rolled hem, because I love rolled hems and I use them a lot on a lot of different fabrics. Certainly, here's an example with this green thread. This is a rayon thread that I used in the needle and the loopers. It just happened to be a thread that matched, so that's what I put in there. Let me see if I'll bring it a little closer to you. And, you know, it gives me a really, really nice look. But my preference is when I'm doing napkins, if I'm doing a rolled hem, to use the woolly poly because it will, and maybe you don't understand what a rolled hem does, but it's actually taking the top fabric and rolling it. And when I go to do a rolled hem, you're going to see the fabric is literally going to, I'm going to cut like a 1/4 of an inch off, and it is going to take the fabric and roll almost, well, at least 1/8 of an inch and sometimes more depending upon how you set. So a rolled hem is generally something that you use for lighter weight fabric because of that, because it needs to roll it. And then if you're going to be using a very, very sheer fabric, like this sheer silk, and if you were using a rolled hem on that, it's so delicate that the stitch will fall off. So in that case, I would use a 2-thread rolled hem. But again, you're always going to get a beautiful look with the woolly poly. And there's different brands that have different names, but that you'll know it because it's meant for specifically for stuff like this. It's stretchy and it doesn't break. It works great for blankets. It works great for all kinds of different things. And so I'm going to go over and do a rolled hem now. Is there any other questions before I go?
Yes, somebody would like to know where you are using that woolly thread. Are you using it in the loopers only, loopers and needles?
Yeah, no, only in the loopers. Any of these fancy threads that I'm using are only used in the loopers. And the loopers have a big eye to them. So you can use thick cords like this in the looper, but you wouldn't be able to use that in the needle. So generally speaking, any specialty thread I'm going to use in the looper. And there is a couple of exceptions for that. One of them is if I am using a serger and I'm kind of serging the edge of my quilt and I'm going to sew on binding. Usually I sew my binding to the back and then I flip it to the front. So what I do when I'm serging those edges is to get a really nice finished edge for all my layers. And it keeps all of my edge of my quilt really nice and square, gets rid of all the rest of the threads, is I will set up a fusible thread in my upper looper, okay, which would be this one, the one on top. And the lower looper, I'll just keep the regular thread. And again, I'm using the specialty thread in the looper. But when I sew the binding onto the back and flip it to the front, because I use fusible thread, and look at how much thread stitching is there, right? So that would all be fusible thread. And then you can press your binding in place, and you don't have to worry about clips and all that stuff holding it, because the fusible thread is holding it in place. So there's a reason why I use all kinds of different threads. You've probably seen some of the jewelry I've made with the 3-thread rolled hem, and I use this cord in both the loopers, and I used a regular orange thread, something just like a regular rayon thread in the needle, and it made this beautiful chain jewelry that was gorgeous. And I didn't bring it today because I got too many other things to talk about. So let me get back on track, and I'm going to go over and set our machine to a rolled hem, and you can think of some more questions to ask me while I go and switch that over. Okay. All righty. So I'm back at my machine. The first thing I'm going to do when I want to change is I'm going to go and change my stitch. So I'm going to go up, and I'm going to select a 3-thread rolled hem. 3-thread rolled hem, stitch number 14. Don't you love it that it's got that all set for me? And now it tells me I'm going to be using the right needle, the blue needle, and the red and the green loopers. So if I'm looking here and I'm coming down, I really don't have to change my loopers because I already have the loopers in the red and the green. And then this is the button for the air threading. So when I threaded them, and if we have time at the end, I'll go over how that's done. But I put both the threads in there. I let some extra hang down. I touched that button. Boom, it threaded my loopers for me. So nothing has to change here in the loopers. The only thing I have to do is I have to take out my, let me see here, my left needle. All right. And when I close this down, you can see that I'm confirming that by looking here on my screen, and it's showing me that I'm going to be using the right needle. So I'm going to take my trusty tool, and I'm going to take out my A needle. And usually when I'm doing something like this, I like to put, and this is a really good tip, if you've ever dropped your needles into your machine, you can put this up or not, it really doesn't matter. But it's a good idea to put some fabric underneath where the needles are so you don't accidentally drop them into your machine, because they are not easy to get out if you do. So I'm just going to go in and loosen that screw. And you notice I've still kept the thread attached. And that's another trick I usually do. So the thread is still attached. So even if I did drop it, it won't fall into the machine because I have it still connected. So at this point, I'm going to cut the thread, and I will pull that needle thread out of position. All right. Because I'm not using that A needle. And this is just an extra thread we can get rid of. Let me just see if I can pull that back here like that. There we go. All right. Now I'm ready to start my blind hem. I think. Let's look at everything. Let's check our settings, right? We're on woven medium fabric. Since I'm working with one layer of a cotton, maybe I'm going to put it on a woven light. And that kind of changes the needle recommendation is now an 80. And then this is the settings. There's my right needle is at 2.0. This is my upper looper and my lower looper. If I have a reason to change it, I can always override it. But there's one other thing I do when I'm doing a rolled hem, and that is I always lower my stitch length as short as it'll go. Now, if you find when you're doing a rolled hem that it doesn't look as full as you want to, that's where you'll find that the woolly poly does a great job. It kind of like fills it in. It looks like a very thin thread, and then when it relaxes, it fills it out. The other thing you can do, and I did this yesterday, an example that I did, is you can use 2 threads in the looper at the same time. And so the thread that you're seeing in a rolled hem is the upper looper is rolling to the back. So if you wanted to, you could put 2 of the same thread or 2 different threads in your looper at one time. I did this with Robinson Anton rayon yesterday, and it looked great. And then that fills in your rolled hem to make it even look fuller. But honestly, nothing looks as nice as the woolly poly stuff. It's really beautiful, and it just gives you a gorgeous rolled hem. Okay, so I'm going to come back. Let me show you the rolled hem that I just did. This is one I did yesterday. All right. And today I've got a dark green thread on. So I'm going to close up. Oh, sorry about that. Close up my door. I'm kind of like a little bit jinxed today, I think. There we go. And I'm going to pull over some more of the samples of what I did. Here was an example of a rolled hem, and I used that lighter green. I'll pull it up there so you can see. And here's another one where I use the darker green that I'm using today. And really, every different thread that you will use will give you a different look. Both of these, it's just one thread in the looper, one thread in the upper looper, and one thread in the lower looper. Nothing fancy. I just kind of wanted to test it out and see. So I'm going to show you how that stitches out. Any questions, Amy?
No new questions.
All right. Come on, guys. I want to make sure you're awake. Give me some questions. All right. Now, so what I'm doing, again, it's the same thing, but this time I'm going to go and start on the edge. And I usually, if I have gone to a great effort to square this fabric up so that it's going to look square, I don't want to cut too much off, because that's when I can wander around and, then all of a sudden my square napkin is not so square anymore. So I'm usually lining up my fabric so that it is right on this edge right here. And if you really want to make sure not to change the size, you can put on the blind hem foot, because there'll be a bar that'll ride along here. And then that is going to control you're not cutting any extra fabric on. Now, there's one more thing that I've not done. Does anybody know what it would be? Let's go and look up here. One more thing. I'm going to go to the information screen. All right. When it comes to a rolled hem, and that's why this is so valuable to you, you're going to be using the A, which is for overlock. Your blade is up. This is your 2-thread converter that's up. But this one thing right here, we haven't done this yet. I need to pull that stitch finger from the end position, which is normal, to rolled hem. And I want to show you, I'm not going to do it because I want you to see what will happen if you forget to do that. Because I think a lot of times the best learning that we do is when we're making mistakes and trying to figure things out. But that's why I always recommend, even when you know what you're doing, it's not a bad idea to look at this info display screen, because it will tell you everything that you need to know. All right. So I'm going to do this, but I'm leaving the stitch finger in the normal position. And even though I have the left needle out, it's still going to make this stitch very, very wide. All right. So when I look at this, can you see how wide that is? It's not bad. It's just not the way it's supposed to look. It kind of almost looks like a satin stitch, doesn't it? See on the front and the back? Let me see if I can get you a better lighting in here. All right, there's the back, there's the front. So it's not so much that it's bad, it's just not what I'm looking for. And so now I'll lift the foot up. I'm going to pull the stitch finger back toward me so it's in the R position. And I'll put the foot down. And now let's see what a difference it makes. I am going to let some fabric cut because I want you to see the rolling. All right. So as I go, you can see my needles here. It's going to roll a lot of the fabric. So look at how pretty that is. Isn't that gorgeous? Now that's what a rolled hem should look like. That is not what a rolled hem should look like. But a lot of times the best lessons we learn by making mistakes. So if you're ever doing a rolled hem and you feel like it's not looking the way it's supposed to, then double check to make sure your stitch finger has been pulled back. I think those are really fun times to learn. I did it yesterday accidentally, and I thought I should just kind of show them what the difference is, because it's not that it's bad, it's just different. But look at what a gorgeous rolled hem that is. I am using royal blue in the needle, which is right here. And I used a dark green on the one side and a dark green on the other side. that's just about a perfect rolled hem. And so if I'm going to start to come back the other way, I'm going to come back. Oh, look at that. I got to cut. I'm going to have to cut some of that off anyways, because I've got to cut. And I'm just going to cut off the tail here. Because the threads are wound so tight, it's automatically going to allow me to lock in those stitches. I'm just going to sew right off, serge right off the edge. All right. And then I always come up and cut the tail up here. And I've got a beautiful, now this edge right here. All right. And I'm going to come back over here. There's a couple of different techniques that you can do this. This is not the kind of stitch where you're going to be able to take this thread and weave it into the rolled hem, because the rolled hem is so tight. And so usually you can either use fray block or fray check. Fray check, I believe, will wash away, but the fray block will stay. So this might be an opportunity or a better option to use the fray block. At least that's what I've heard. Okay. I don't own any stock in any company, but give them a try. I usually find that the stitching is so tight that when I trim it here, it just holds it anyways. But it's a good idea to put something on there, especially if you're giving it as a gift. You want it to be able to hold, right? So I made these, this placemat. And look, isn't that a gorgeous placemat? I'll just show it to you. I've added the fringe stitch to this, and I sewed the strips together with a 2-thread wide. And then I came in and I quilted all around the sunflowers, and I added some decorative stitches for my quilting here, and I bound it. And now I wanted to make some napkins for it. So this gives me that opportunity. You can make lunch napkins. You can make dinner napkins. Usually if I'm doing something that I'm making a lot of different napkins, it's going to depend upon who I'm making them for and what they're likely to use. But I know my daughter-in-law, they try and really be, watching, using a lot of wasteful, like paper towels and stuff like that. And they use napkins all the time. So the nice thing about something like this is you can color coordinate, as far as gifts and stuff. I'm just going to come back here 1 second. I'm going to grab this and come in front of the camera here. All right. And I'll come back. So I love making placemats for people, and I use all different kinds. This one, I'd already done the stitch with the fringe, and I was trying to think what I could do with it. I thought, well, that'd be a cool placemat. But there's so many different, a lot of you are quilters out there, and you do, a lot of big quilts and stuff like that. But there is no better gift you can give somebody than placemats. And this one's double-sided. You can see I've got the sunflowers on the other side. Placemats that match somebody's decor is such a personal gift. And if you can give them some homemade napkins, this is the kind of thing that it might take you a little while working with the placemats. I usually do all my placemats after I've quilted, got the piecing done. I'll put them in my embroidery and do the cross hatching and embroidery, because then I don't even have to quilt them. But making some personal napkins really does set the gift to the next level. And they're very, very easy to make, very easy to, when you think about a yard of fabric, well, if you were going to make big napkins, like I'll show you these guys here. These are big, big napkins. Okay. These are, I think I made them 20 inches. So I had a ruler that was 20 inches, and these are really outstanding if you wanted them for a dinner napkin. And you can, you really got a nice look to them. Isn't that fabric beautiful? I got that down at Charlotte's Sewing Studio in Port Charlotte last week. I was there doing some events. So it's really kind of cool to think about how you can kind of color coordinate your placemats with your napkins. And this is a double-sided. So there's a few tips I'm going to give you. They're a little bit different for that. Before I go and show you that, though, here's another one that I'm doing. And I made this, again, with that fringe stitch. Isn't that just exquisite, that shiny green thread? And it's more like a cord. It looks like this. All right. And it is pretty thick. You can see it's got some really heaviness to it, probably a 6 weight. And this one is by Wonderfill, but I use all different kinds. So I have no loyalty. This one is Filane by Sulky, and this is like a wool. And so that gives it a whole different look too when you're doing that. But now I haven't figured out what I'm going to make with this. I don't know what it's going to be, but it feels like it needs to be something special. And then I sewed the next stitches with the floating stitches, which, are on the Quilt 97 and the Epic 3. So this is a project to be, but I use the applique stitches, and look at how gorgeous. It's just amazing to me how we can get this beautiful look. And mixing up your serger and sewing machine gives you that opportunity to do something special. And nobody's going to be able to guess how you did this. All right. So, Amy, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. So somebody had asked how you do a turn in a rolled hem, but I think you answered that by saying you don't.
You don't. The problem is that the rolled hem is so tight, and when you pull it off the stitch finger, there's no way you can account for that gap, right? You could try and pull all the threads back, but then you've got nothing to hold on to. Remember when I was talking about the, let me see if I can find the one that I just did. Probably can't. Where did I put it? Oh, it's gone. If you're going to do something like that, when you're going to feed the next part of your rolled hem into place, you need that thread to be underneath so you can kind of hold it, because that helps start the fabric. When you're doing a rolled hem, the stitch is really, really, really close together. And so sometimes if you don't have that thread hanging out, there's nothing really that gets it started. It kind of just sits in the same place. So you kind of need that thread. And that's why I wouldn't recommend cutting that out. And I will go and show you. I'll do it again and show you what would happen if you were doing that. But let's talk about this example here of a rolled hem. Now, this is 2 layers. There probably is a little bit oversized, but any really elegant napkin you might buy in the store is going to be about 20 inches, somewhere between 18 and 20 inches. This is what it looks like folded up. So it's a hefty, nice napkin. It feels luxurious because there's 2 layers of fabric there. And I love the look of it, having it 2-tone like this one here that I did. This matched a pair of placemats that I did probably 10 years ago. And this has been washed and washed and washed. And look at how beautiful that is. I mean, it really is just gorgeous. And it's so nice to have those 2 colors. But a rolled hem is normally set for a woven light fabric because it needs to roll the fabric. And I'm going to go and put my fabric back in there again, because I really want you to see how much it's rolling and how it's rolling. I'm going to start it, and then I'm going to take the foot off so you can see that. So when you're doing something like a double-sided fabric, you don't want to have it set on a woven light. You're going to use set for a woven medium, and you're going to get a surprise because your machine is going to show you that it doesn't recommend that. And that's the cool thing about watching what your Amber Air 600 is telling you, is once you start doing things, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means, okay, I have to think about something a little bit different. So let's go back to my machine, and my serger gets used all the time because I'm always coordinating different kinds of things in the sewing room with my serger. And so right now I'm on a woven light fabric, right? It automatically defaulted to woven light, I think. If I go to a woven medium, all right, well, it let me do it. 3-thread roll. Oh, I know, it's the other one that I didn't do it. But as I'm going here, it brought the stitch back to 1.2. I'm going to come back here like this, and I'm going to shorten the stitch length. Now, when I go to move my fabric, and I remember how I told you about how much it rolls. If you find a fabric is not rolling enough and you need it to roll more, that's where you have to think about this blade. Right now on my screen, it's telling me 6.0, and I have that set at 7. So it's going to roll more fabric. If I move it to where it recommends at the 6, it'll move the blade over to the left, and it will not roll as much fabric. Now, when it comes to this heavier fabric, all right, you can see up here where it says 6.0. And if I was going to be rolling a double piece, I had 2 layers of fabric, all right, it's not going to roll as much as it would if it was 1 layer. because the fabric is stiffer. So let's go, and I think I'll I'll fold it like this. All right. And I'm going to move the blade back to 6.5 just for the fun of it. All right. And I'm going to go and start my rolled hem. Okay. And I'm going to open it up. I'm going to pull this over here like this. And I'm going to lift my foot up and take the foot off so you can see. So do you see where the stitch is? And maybe you need to even be over this way more. You'll see where the stitch is, right? Look at how much fabric is to the right of that rolled hem. All of that fabric is getting rolled to the back, and that's what's sealing that rolled hem in there and what makes it so beautiful when you look at a stitch that's finished like this, okay? This one, I did the stitch length at 1.2, and you can see the stitches are not as close as they are there on the 1.0, but that is so important to be able to get that rolled hem. So if you're working with a little more delicate fabric and you feel it's not rolling the hem very well, you can kind of control it by moving the blade and making it a little bit wider. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to straighten this out. Let me see how we are doing for time here. And we're 3:42. Okay, we're going to make it, I think. I'm just going to sew down here. I want to show you what will happen at the end. So you see how tight that stitch is, right? It's really nice and tight. So if I'm going to cut it off right here like this so that I don't have any tail left. And now I want to go back and I want to start this underneath here. It sometimes will kind of like not want to feed. It's doing a good job. But see, I've got this tail back here that I can hold on to, but it's not connected to the fabric. But I want it to go back like that and right over that edge. And look what a beautiful corner I've got there. Wait a second. Let me get it up for you to see. All right. So I've got a really nice corner there. All I have to do is put a little bit of that, whatever that stuff is that I told you that I've forgotten right now. And what was it called?
Fray block.
Fray block. Yes. Thank you very much, Amy. All right. Now, so the only thing that you need to think about when you are doing a double-sided is make sure to think that stitch length is nice and short. Use woolly poly if you have it in the loopers, and don't expect it to roll as much as a very thin fabric. So you might need to make the blade a little wider if you're going to do 2 layers to give it a little more room for it to come down and loop. And you're really going to just test it out by each fabric is going to be a little bit different. But wouldn't these be beautiful, beautiful gifts to make for the holidays? And really all it is, if you're buying 20 inches, that's like 1.25 yards will make 4 napkins. If you're going to make your napkin 16 inches, then you're probably getting about the same amount. So, why not make them bigger? If you're going to make them smaller, like 12 inches, then you could get 6 napkins. I think these were cut 10 inches. So, even this is not a bad size. But I was telling you, I'm really impressed. My daughter-in-law, Mia, and my son, Brendan, they have, napkins they have for all their different meals. And it's a way of kind of conserving some of the paper towels and the waste that we have on paper and stuff like that. So many people these days really enjoy getting a set of napkins, and they just throw them in the laundry and take them, and they've got them for the next meal. So it's something to consider, even yourselves, if you would like a little bit more elegance with your meals, is to make yourself a set of napkins. And it really spiffs up the holiday table. So think about it for Thanksgiving or Christmas. All right, now we're getting to the really exciting part. Let me do one more thing. Well, I guess no, we'll go to this. We're going to do the fringe because I'm afraid of running out of time. I wanted to show you how you would go around corners. If we have enough time after we do this, I'll come back and I'm going to show you. But let's go and move to a fringe stitch. Here's some examples of This is before it is opened. So it's not a fringe yet. It's just a 2-thread wrapped. And here again, I've done it on vinyl and leather. Lots of different examples of doing it. And this one is one that's been open. And look at how pretty that is. Isn't that pretty? So I'm coming back. I'm going to do the same thing in the same order. I'm going to select my stitch, right? That's always my first thing I do is I select a 2-thread. I think it's stitch number 20. All right. And so it shows me that I'm going to be using my left needle and I'm going to be using only one looper, which is the green looper. That's all it does. And if I wanted to see if anything's changing, notice that it's showing me my stitch finger should be on the normal setting. So I'm going to have to move that from roll back up there like that. And this is something else that's very, very different. You only do this when you're using a 2-thread. It's called a 2-thread converter. So I'm going to come down and I'll show you what that looks like. And then I'm going to thread my machine so you can see how that looks. Okay. So this is the 2-thread converter. Guess what? You only use it when you're doing 2 threads. If you're not using 2 threads, then it's always going to be over here to the right. So I'm going to cut my loopers. Let me see if I can find my scissors. There they are. All right. And I'm going to cut my loopers because I'm going to put a thicker cord in my my green looper. And I'm only going to have one needle. So let's do things in order just so that I can think about it correctly, right? I'm going to pull back my stitch finger into the normal position. The needle that I need is telling me it's the A needle. So all I'm going to do is move my needle from the B position to the A position. And I can put some fabric underneath so I don't accidentally drop it. I'm not going to unthread it yet. I leave it threaded. I'm going to move it out of the B position. When I do that, I'm going to tighten up that screw again, the Allen screw. And now I'm putting this into the A position and make sure it's up all the way and tightening it. Oops, sorry, I'm not giving you a very good view. Okay, so I put my finger there. You can put a threader there, and I tighten that up. It's always important to tighten not only the needle that you just put the needle in, but if you took a needle out of somewhere, it's really important to tighten that too. Because if it's loose, as the serger is vibrating and surging at 100 miles an hour, that screw can keep loosening it. And then if you lose the screw, you can't actually put the needle in there anymore. So it's a good idea to always tighten the screws once you've taken the needle out. Okay, now, just a thought for everybody. Just because I move that needle to the A position, I don't have it threaded right because the thread needs to go in the A path. And right now the thread's in the B path. So the B path has no tension on it. So don't trick yourself into thinking you can just kind of leave it there and float away and everything will be good. No, you got to change your thread to that A path. So I'm going to do that now. Let me move this back out here a little bit so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Zoom back out. All right. So I'm going to cut my thread and I can pull the tail out of the bottom. And I'm going to take my blue thread, which is in the A position, and I'm going to put it into the path for the A needle. I click it back in the tension back here, and I'm coming down underneath like this. And it's going to come up like that. And when I bring it here, I usually kind of set it in here like that. And then once I get it to this point, it's going to seat itself right behind. There's a little opening behind here that I'm going to get the thread in. Let me zoom in there so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, right here, after the thread comes through that hook, there's a place in the back that you're going to put the thread in. And now I'm going to get the needle threaded. And then all I have to do is thread the looper. Okay, I'm not sure what I'm going to use for the looper thread yet. My scissors are not very good. All righty, and let's see if I can get this in first try. I'm kind of at the side because of the camera, so I'm not really getting the best view of the needle. There we go. And I'm going to do that. Now, the reality is normally I would never thread my needle before the looper because the looper has to come up here first and be threaded. If the needle thread is down below the surface, when you thread your looper, things are out of order and then they won't work. But I wanted to show you how to solve that problem because that's a cool thing to know how to do. All righty, what thread am I going to put in there? I think I'm going to put this thread in right here, okay? I have all this crazy, wild, wonderful different cords and stuff. This particular one is called Razzle Dazzle, and it is by Superior. But I have some by Wonderful and some by Madeira and some by YLI. And there's no shortage of companies that makes heavier cords like this. All right, this is going in the green looper. So I'm coming down like this. I have never used this thread in this serger before. So it'll be interesting to see if it threads. Everyone's a little thicker and a little different looking. All right. And I just want to check and make sure here. So we're all set. All right. So to thread our looper, what we need to do is we're going to go from our regular serging into our air threading. Isn't that easy? And then I need to lock the channels here. So I'm going to turn the hand wheel toward me until the channels lock. So now all the channels are locked. And then I'm going to go and put the thread into the looper. Now, this thread is kind of a little bit loosey-goosey, and it's very rough. So this might be an example of a cord that wouldn't work well to go through the air threading, but it's all right because we included with your serger, there's a wire that'll let you pull the cord through there. Unfortunately, I didn't grab it and have it with me, so I may not be able to show you that part. But that would have been a good thing to show you, I think. But let's see what happens when I go try and use the air threading. And without having the wire near me, I might be stuck if it doesn't go through. So let's see. Okay, so I'm just taking my tweezers and I'm putting it down. And I like to live dangerously, so I have no idea if this is going to work or not. But that's the way everything is, right? We learn by trial and error. And when things work, then that's great. And when they don't work, well, then we have to reevaluate. All right, so I'm going to touch this button. And you notice I've left enough fullness out here, right, of the cord. There needs to be enough extra cord down here so that it's going to just feed through as I go. All right, so I'm going to just hold this up here just to kind of show you what's happening. See how it's going through? Now, if it goes through and it stops at a certain place, I often find it'll help if you kind of lift it up and take some of the weight of it. See, it's pulling it through, right? It still hasn't gone through over here, though. And it's kind of stopped. And so that means that I can either try again or I can give up and put another cord in that's going to work easier. And for the sake of time, I think I might put another cord in. I had a feeling I might need the wire for this because it's a very rough cord. It's got a lot of metallic in it. So I'm going to put something that's a little smoother in there like that. Okay. So this time I'm going to put this one in here. This is a 12 weight thread. Okay. So let's try this one. Sorry about my arm. I should have put the wire. It would have been cool for you to see the wire going through. I'm sorry I didn't do that, but it'll be something for next time, right? I've got lots more serger projects planned. So if you've been sitting on the fence about getting an Amber Air 600, it's a good time to do it because we got lots and lots of videos and cool techniques that are planned. All right. I usually use the tweezers to put this down into the hole like this. And I usually trim the edge, which I didn't for this. And I have done some other videos, and Amy and I have got other videos planned. So now when I touch the button, there it is. It came out this end here. Look at that. See how nice that was? So when you do this, it's all going to depend. Like this is a yarn type of thing. This would go through. It's not all that thick, actually. It's just more yarn-like. The ones that tend to not go through where you need to use the wire are ones that either have a lot of rough metallic or they're so thick that they just, like this one is right on the edge. I can get this one in, but see, it's nice, smooth type of rayon. Even though it's a 6 weight, it's very, very thick. it goes through very easily. So you just got to kind of experiment. Now, this is the important part when you're doing this. Remember that 2-thread converter? I'm going to come down here and I'm going to show you. This has a very important job to do when you're doing any kind of 2-thread. You're going to move it over and you're going to click it into the hole where that looper is. What that does is it fools, I'm going to try and see if we can get some more light here. It fools the eye. There, oh, I had more light there for a second. It fools this looper into thinking there's thread in it, but there's not. So it's kind of like a trick. And most sergers have a 2-thread converter like that. And then you're going to take your looper thread and pull it over the top and to the back. So right now I have a blue needle thread and 1 looper. And I pulled the rolled hem away from the rolled hem into the normal. And then the bigger you want your fringe to be, the more you're going to change your blade. Okay, so move your blade. So over here where I have the blade, I want it to go all the way to the right. So I'm just going to rotate it until it's at 7. Because now the blade is far away and it's going to let me have a really nice big wide fringe. Okay, so we're going to zoom back a little bit. And I'm going to close this up. Now you notice when I go to close the door, it doesn't want to close. And that's because the last thing I need to do, it kind of protects you from making a mistake. To go from the threading to serging, you have to push that lever over to the right. And now the door closes and I'm ready to start serging. All right, so let's see what this looks like. Where am I going to do this on this thread, on this fabric here, okay? So I'm going to, let's see, put my foot down. And if I want to, I can just, I like to tuck my threads underneath the bottom, but you don't have to. It's just a habit of mine. And I'm just going to sew, put my foot on the pedal. And what I'm looking for is to make sure that it is, threads are forming on the stitch finger. You see those threads? And so I know it's threaded right. If it doesn't thread like that, now, and then the last thing, I know it's threaded, I know it's going, but remember how I told you that you shouldn't have the needle threaded? Let me cut this thread. Because I actually did this, I meant to show it to you. All right. If you accidentally, when you thread your machine, I'm going to pull this looper back up over here again. When you're threading your machine, remember how when we went to do the air threading and I had you rotate the hand wheel so it would lock the chamber? What that does is it pushes the needle thread down below the surface and that puts it out of order. So I don't mind that the needle threader's there, but before I start serging again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to either take my little screwdriver and pull up the needle thread up above the surface, which puts it in the right order. And that's a lot easier than having to rethread the needle. So that's usually my go-to thing. The other thing I want to do is make sure my stitch finger is locked into that position. Okay. So now if I'm going to go and I'm going to start serging on this edge here like this. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit more so you can just see what I'm doing. All right. I've got a finished edge here. It's a folded edge. And that's the neat thing about this technique. You could have a nice finished edge there and it's going to do a great job. And I'm also going to take this little, they call it micro tension. I'm going to move that all the way up because that's going to let the fringe stitch be even wider. And I'm going to put my foot down, but I don't want to cut my fabric. I just want to leave my fabric like this. Okay. So as I start serging, it's going to start and it's just going to do a stitch, but I notice that it is not very close together. It's kind of far apart, which is not the look I want. So here's the changes that you need to make on your machine. If you're going to do this, all right, here I'm nice and close. Notice that right now I have the fabric selected is E. The reason for that is this is normally a stitch you would use on a knit, all right, like a stretchy knit fabric. But if I go to select something else, it won't let me do it because it's not recommended for that. but it doesn't mean I can't do it. It just means it's warning you, depending upon what you got in mind, it may or may not work. And so I'm going to leave it the way it is because I need to. But isn't it amazing how your machine protects you? It wants you to think about what's going on. It also has given me a blade width of 6. And I know that I wanted it wider, so I moved it to the 7. So you can override these in any way you want to. The other thing you want to do is if you want a really beautiful full fringe, is you want to move your stitch length down as low as it'll go, which is 1, right? And now I could go in here and I could save it. I have 30 places that I could go in and save it. And then I could go in there and name it whatever I want. This is the stitch that I just did here. And I could name it. I've already saved it on my machine. It's right here. And I've got it, another one up there. No, yeah, I have it saved here too. But all you have to do is if you want to name it, is go in and call it fringe stitch. And then when you come back later on, it will be there for you a week later or a month later. And then you don't have to make any of the changes. So what I did was I have my A needle. I shortened my stitch length to 1.0. And this is the other thing I wanted to point out. Do you see here the differential? It automatically changed the differential for me because it thought that I'm working with knit fabric, right? And this is what made me pay attention to this. When I did this fringe stitch like this, do you notice how the leather stretched out? Because with a knit fabric, it's kind of like it acts differently, right? And so you want to think about something like this. If you find that a fabric you're using is stretched out, then you're going to want to have to go up. With this one here, I would have changed the differential to probably 1.6, something like that. And then the leather wouldn't have stretched. But for what I'm doing right now, I'm not working with a knit. I don't need the differential to be at 1.3. I can set it. I mean, everything else I did, I set it at 1.3, and I think it turned out pretty darn good. But if I put it at 1.0, it would probably turn out pretty darn good too, because it's not a knit fabric. So I'm going to go back and show you what it's going to look like. And then we'll call it a day. I'm sorry for going over time, Amy. Is there any questions while I'm going to finish this up?
Well, the last question we had was actually asking about the stitch length on the fringe. So I think you answered that already for her.
Oh, perfect. All right. So now I'm just going to sew. And notice I'm not cutting away. Up there where I didn't need to. All right. And now what I have, it looks like a satin stitch. Isn't that pretty? And it really is a nice finish. You can see it up here close like that. So now, right now, what I have is just looks like a satin stitch. There's one more thing you need to do when you're going to do a fringe stitch. And let me see if I can find my samples that I made. All right, let me see if I can find them. Where did I put them? Yes, here. So the last secret to making a fringe stitch, I'm going to come back to the screen and I'm going to show you this, is if I go to the needle tension's at 3. For me to get this look of a real fringe, I want to bring this down to 0, because otherwise all it's going to do is going to bring me a stitch that looks like this. I mean, it's pretty. It looks like a satin stitch, but it's not a fringe stitch. Okay. So I'm going to bring my needle tension down to 0. So there's no tension on the needle. 0, 0, 0. There we go. Okay. And then I would save that again if I forgot to do it, because I can override what I just did and save it. All right. But now what's going to happen is when I serge, and I'll show you up over here, actually. When I serge, it's going to look like this. And you can see I used a much heavier cord for that one, right? And on the back, you'll see the needle thread. The needle thread is very, very, very loose. Do you see that needle thread? It almost looks like its own satin stitch there. So, and I'll show you what it looks like stitched out. Don't worry. But once you're done, what you're going to do is you're going to go to your sewing machine and you're going to sew down exactly with your sewing machine where the needle was. And then once you finish with that, you're going to go in the back, and I'll do it now for you to see. All right, on the back here like this, and I'm going to cut the needle thread. And as I cut the needle thread away, because I sewed with the sewing stitch, now, whoops, that part all fell apart. Oh, that's the side. I didn't sew this one with a fringe. When I cut it away, I didn't sew that side. Well, that wasn't too bright of me. I was going to go to the sewing machine, but we're out of time to do it. So see, if you don't sew the sewing thing, it just falls apart, right? But if you do sew with a sewing machine straight down, and then you go back and cut the needle thread away, it becomes a three-dimensional fringe like that. I'll do it, and I did it the same thing here. This time, I used instead of a straight stitch, I did a little satin stitch, which I thought was kind of a cool look. Gives it a different look to it altogether. All right, and so anytime you're doing that, and I'm going to come back and show you, let me get my fabric. I'm going to do one more turn, all right, and then I'll have to say goodbye because I'm way over time. But I hope you've been enjoying this and feel like you were going to be able to explore your serger a little bit more. Okay, so hold on. I'm coming back over here like this. All right, and I'm not cutting. Wait a second here. I got a piece of denim this time. All right. Now, in this case, I used a blue. Let me see if I can zoom back out and get a little bit better color for you here. You see that gold color is the front thread, and the blue is the needle thread. So what I'm going to do is I can go to my, look, I pulled up a sewing machine even over there to do it. I didn't get ready to have enough time. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to sew right on the same area where my needle stitched. So I'm going to kind of lock down that fringe to stop it from falling apart. And then after that, I'm going to go in the back and I'm going to trim the needle thread away. And the fringe is going to pop out to the front and be all that nice full. You can see what a big difference it makes depending upon your thread you use, right? This is a 12-way thread and this is a 6-way thread. Whoops. Where do I have my camera here? Look at the difference between one thread and another. All right. And that's all it is just the difference in the threads. So as I come back, Amy wanted me to show this. It wasn't the best demo because, you know, like I was running out of time, but thank you all for your patience. But isn't that just the coolest thing? And when you look at the different results you get, look at that gorgeous fringe. And you can see it's all freestanding. It will wash really, really well. You could use it on a garment maybe or on a sleeve or something like that. And the coolest thing is you can have a finished edge underneath. So look at this is really, really thick, right? That's on the leather. And on the back, if you do have a finished edge, then, or maybe you even serged the edge like this and then did the fringe on top, that won't affect the edge of the stitching. This is still going to look really, really nice. And so it's really, you could do it on the edge of a sleeve, on the edge of a jacket, and it would look just great. The trick is making sure to lower your needle tension and make the stitch as wide as you can. Move the blade over as wide as you can. That way your fringe is going to be as full looking as you can. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. Amy, anything else before I say goodbye?
Just everybody now going to try to find time in their schedules in order to play a little bit. Me too.
Well, that's the thing, you know, you never know when you're doing something like this. You've got to give yourself a little bit of grace and try some things, right? You know, try a thread you think might work and then experiment with the way the different threads work. And I hope everybody challenges themselves to make a set of napkins. And, you know, maybe it's a set of placemats for your favorite person, or maybe just for yourself. Maybe you're your favorite person. Make some placemats and some napkins for yourself. And you always know you can find me on Karen Loves to Quilt and Sew on Facebook. I'll answer any questions there too. But if you've got any questions, make sure to mark them in the comments, and I'm going to come back after this is over and I'll make sure to answer all of them. So thank you for joining me today. It's been delightful. And as usual, you know, it's a wacky day when we're doing Facebook Lives, but it's so much fun when we give ourselves time to play with our machines. So have a wonderful night and have fun with your Amber 600 serger if you haven't. And if not, you should go in and see it because it's really pretty cool. Bye, everybody.